I'm interviewing you, right?
No, no bloody interviews at all.
Oh, there's no
It's,
bloody interviews at all.
no, it's just talking. You see, this is
Oh,
why I
okay.
emphasize. This is really, you see the difference. I mean, um,
It's totally different.
as it can be.
I saw John Cleese and Eric Idle both on a show, and they started off by saying, "I'm interviewing you, aren't I?" He said, "No, no, you're interviewing me. I have a book. You don't."
Oh,
It was
that's
quite
good.
funny. Yeah.
I mean, there is this, what comes to mind to me, this sort of existential challenge in terms of conversations here between us and two people who sort of know various things, maybe a lot. Um, and you think thing starts during the process, and how much of all this repertoire, this background, these connections can come into the conversation using just a smidgen, a small fraction. And so there's then the temptation to come prepared with a set of notes. I must get these points over or refer to so and so. And that's, I haven't actually done that lately at all. I did it a few times. I thought I'd try and be focused, but so I've
I
opted for you.
I have my notes.
Was that the bit cut out?
That was the important bit that I decided to not use.
Yes, that's very good.
It was way too much planning.
Indeed. You see, because it's this contrast sometimes made between sort of Western and Asian conversation. The Westerners are always trying to get to the point.
Uh-huh.
And the Asians are enjoying the scenery, is my way of expressing it. And so this seemingly discourse on irrelevances is
Mm.
difficult to have mode of conversation. The Westerners want to cut to the chase. We've only got so much time. Let's focus on what's important and all that kind of thing, which I personally have come to eschew and not follow at all.
That's right. What is the goal of this conversation? What are we going to prove or disprove? What's the takeaway for the listener?
Oh, you disgusting fellow. That is the point. Well, we could almost start our conversation by even by this chit chat and say let's be out front about what's going on and not just this um, prepared thing. And it connects, making a connection again, because I won't repeat about this making connection. I often apologize. I say my associations go off sideways in all sorts of directions. But this is about the wonderful thing by a biochemist paper he called Is the Scientific Paper a Fraud? He wasn't debunking science as such, he said, but everybody's geared to write these scientific papers in a certain way, in a certain format. You see, the format actually suppresses what actually goes on because it never happens like that. They have to present it as if it was. We did these experiments, we got these results, we did these calculations, we got these conclusions, therefore. It's never like that. Things go wrong, they change direction, they adopt different methods, they encounter different information, and that's how it actually happens. But you're not allowed to say that because they're supposed to be, that was a a long time ago now, so it was 100 years ago, the standard thing. There was supposed to be a scientific method and a procedure you had to follow. In other words, important things were in charge of bureaucrats, who ran universities and that kind of thing. And so it was very difficult for them just to say this is actually what happened. That's why sometimes reading early science, like 19th century scientists, because they talk about what they actually did
Mm.
in history, and they tell the story, and it's not dressed up in this formalistic way, which is supposed to be in a style which makes it seem more objective, impersonal. There was a wonderful book. I don't know if you heard of it, actually by a biochemist who was writing in the 30s, I think, and it's a wonderful book called Personal Knowledge. As he took a realistic attitude, he said, "Look, you get into this realm of hard thinking in science and so on. And it's, in a way, it's very costly to oneself, to one's energies and all the rest of it. So unless there is this personal commitment, you won't follow it through. You know, it is because it requires this personal commitment. So you've got to make it personal. And this seems at first, for the kind of people looking at science on the outside, as something objectionable. Oh, it's supposed to be objective, you know, there's going to be no personal interest. But it's so unrealistic.
Mm.
Without the personal interest, you won't sustain the energies to burn the midnight candle and, you know, go without sleep, whatever it is, and make yourself ill from study and argue with people and defend yourself and so on. And it's a very good point, and I've long appreciated it. I remember reading his book, listening to some boring lecture, actually not listening to some boring lecture, prefer to read this book. Mm. So that is that point.
Would that be similar to Gurdjieff suggesting that we have to have an aim?
No.
No?
No, in some respects. No,
what you said about making it personal, your personal.
Yes, I know. Yeah, it's a different facet. Okay. So you have to have an aim, and you meant it, of course, with the intent of having an intent, a commitment, and that sort of thing, and a shape, a natural direction, which of course it has to have if you're going to be involved in it personally. Yes, that's true. So it could be, but it's a different bent, different side. Yeah.
What is the distinction?
Because it's the thing about making it personal in the Polanyi sense is a consequence, you see, not the actual thing. Having aims there, but you have to then follow through on the consequences. Following this aim is going to cost you. And therefore you've got the personal investment, and it's a challenge which comes next. You could possibly have an aim, like people have this silly aim, a lot of them, I want to be a good person or something like this, which is just nonsense because it's so airy-fairy. Has no value at all, but something comes up where they have to choose something which is sacrificing their own welfare for that of somebody else, and then it's they start hiding behind generalities and not making it personal, because making it personal means the buck stops here. Mm-hmm. It's my fault or whatever it is. But, the thing about it, aim and so on, and intention in this mixture of languages we live in, like I talk about ordinary language and esoteric language or Gurdjieff language or whatever, scientific language, they all have their special bents. And the thing about intention and so on in other fields, like intention, you see, you have this famous philosopher in 19th century, Brentano, who radicalized and influenced all sort of people like Freud, for example, and Husserl, the founder of phenomenology, because he talked about saying consciousness is always intentional. And actually what this intentional means is it's about something. It's not intentional in terms of will or anything. It means the consciousness is about something. It's never just consciousness, but so it's consciousness, consciousness of something. I'm conscious of your image, this kind of thing. And they said you don't have consciousness floating in the air, so it's of something. And so it has this particularization in it. And that's called intentionality. You see, but in the Gurdjieff world, this is a very weak kind of intentionality. Intentionality means we're bringing something extra out of ourselves into what's happening. And you can say, the general trope in Gurdjieff work is, doing all these various things, you can take any of them and do it intentionally. And at first people say, what's the difference? But there is a difference between just doing something and doing it intentionally. Or you can make a difference, you see. And so you're giving yourself a chance of an extra edge on top of what will happen automatically. So that's why you get all that stuff about find out, discover, prove to yourself that you're just a machine and everything goes by clockwork, so to speak. And once you see that's happening and you see it, maybe it's possible to choose certain things and make them connected with your inside as well as your outside. God, I was going to say to you that phrase, which whenever I hear people say, I really get angry, and that's, does this make sense? Do you know what I mean?
Are you following me?
Yeah, no, you're following, and all that terrible, terrible anti-communication, anti-language, anyway. But there, it's like for me, the work, whatever it is, always starts with something like taking anything which is happening anyway and doing it on purpose, like my off-quoted remark from
the singer.
The singer, whose name you will now remember for me.
I'm trying. Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton.
Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton. Yeah. Find out who you are and do it on purpose. You see, that's pure Gurdjieffian outlook. You see, well, we're always doing something, and you say, but do it on purpose. You say, what do you mean do it on purpose? It's already on purpose, because you assume you've already got purpose, and then the work you admit, no, I don't have purpose. It's just going on by itself, and there's no intention in it at all. See, there's nothing. It's just I get up, brush my teeth, have a coffee, scratch my bottom, and catch the tram to work, and you're not actually doing anything.
But I could choose to and be aware of the fact that I'm doing it.
Yes.
At the same time.
Exactly. So you see, you really express it beautifully, and it comes into the art of the actor, of the player, I think, very much. You see, it's you've been to have two worlds. And it's the world of the action, so to speak, which is visible. Because you could think about the theater, because what you do has got to be visible or knowable to the audience in some way, manifest in some way, but there's also an insight. And so you've got this kind of duality where the audience has got to, how do you overall, like infer or sense or believe in an inner world, and the actor is dealing with his own inner world in a certain way to make what he's doing have a content which reflects something more than just the external actions he's taking or even the words he's saying. But that's my layman's description. So you comment on this, there's this picture of the two worlds. Yeah, there must be two worlds.
Well, one of the reasons I found acting so fascinating and devoted my life to it is a kind of what you just said. Something's happening in front of an audience. They're the observers or the witnesses of it. And we are creating, in a way, the illusion of real life, of a story, of a psychology of somebody moving forward. Today, this week, I'm involved in exploring the story of Oedipus.
Oh, gosh.
And we are doing a public, immersive, rehearsed reading of Oedipus on December 3rd. So I'm actively involved in the rehearsals for that. And we're doing it in English. It's the first show we're doing in English.
I just about to ask you, yes.
And I am reading the role of Oedipus. Even though I said I would not direct an act anymore, because it's a reading, I can do it. So
I don't blame you. Seize the chance to read Oedipus.
Oh, yes. And it's a wonderful translation by a man named Brian Dories, who has created something called Theater of War. And he uses Greek tragedies with a very accessible translation made by him, and presents these as readings in front of targeted groups whose life experience reflects the terrible tragedies of people in these Greek tragedies. So I just watched one recently, the Suppliants, the play The Suppliants, which was presented by and to people involved in the Ukraine war. So he actually has the chorus be actually Ukraine citizens who are involved in getting out of Ukraine and begging for refugee status in another country. And the play speaks directly to that. And then he'll have known professional actors read the roles on Zoom from their own home country, their own home living room, and follows it by a in-depth conversation, which is not an analysis of the play, like an intellectual academic analysis, but what touched you, what moved you, what speaks to your experience, what is true for you. The one recently was Philoketis. I'm not pronouncing it correctly. Philocitis.
Was that a sculpture?
It's a play of
sorry,
of Sophocles about a soldier who was left on an island for 9 years because he was bit by a snake, and his suffering was so terrible and the smell of his disease was so bad that his fellow soldiers, including Odysseus on the way to Troy, left him on the island. And their philosophy was leave no man behind, but his suffering was so unbearable that they couldn't take him with them.
God, I didn't know this.
Wow. I didn't know it either. He ended up living for 9 years alone on this island, cursing the soldiers who left him there with a festering wound from the snake. He had herbs that would keep him alive, but nothing would take away the pain.
Oh, God Almighty.
And he was given a bow by a goddess whose arrows never missed, so he could always kill his food. So suffering in silence, in pain. And the story is, to win the Trojan War, Odysseus had to come back to the island, convince him to come with them, or steal the bow. Otherwise, the Trojan War would never be over. So the play picks up that.
What a story.
And this was performed in part of disabled veterans, for disabled veterans. And the readers of the chorus were actual disabled veterans, talking about the way that soldiers are treated once they are thrown on the junk pile. Like, you are invisible, you are no use to us. So, and it was very powerful, the conversations. And what was fascinating about it is that 2,500 years after it was written, it affects people deeply because they find themselves in a similar position when they're no longer useful as military personnel. And now there are veterans organizations that are supporting them and helping them provide useful service in the world. Very moving. What I miss in so much of theater, in the profession, is that the emphasis is on the actor, the director, the concept, the artistic style. And what is forgotten is, who are the receivers of this transmission? And right. That's what I find so powerful about this theater of war approach. It reinvigorated me to say, oh, this is why I love Greek tragedies. I was missing this point. And Brian translates the word amphitheater into a place where people are seen and be seen, where the audience sees and the actors see, and there's a conversation. It was like the word namaste. I see the God in you, sees the God in me, where the conversation can be elevated. And what he put across so clearly is, when the plays were written, Athens was experiencing 80 years of war. They just experienced the greatest plague of their time when a third of the Athenians were dying. So the issues in the play were no different than what people were meeting on their day-to-day life. And so often, a national theater will produce Oedipus and cool masks, nice costumes, beautiful music. And the audience will be the people who can afford the ticket price, and the intelligentsia who will compare one person's performance to another and entirely miss the point that they are touched in a personal way to say, oh my God, this is my real life. So we've been given permission to use the translation of Brian Dory's and Theater of War. And at some point, we'll work on translating it into Spanish. And for this first round, because there is quite an international community centered around our theater, we thought for them, we'd present it in English. Our other shows have been Spanish or bilingual. And doing it as a reading, as a multi-year project. And I think, as I mentioned to you, I'm in a property that, for various unique reasons, has 4 amphitheaters in it. So sometime in the future, I want to produce all 3 plays of the trilogy, one in each amphitheater, and have a procession of people from one to the other, where there's an experience of time between Oedipus at Colonus, and Antigone. We get to see how family trauma is passed through generations, and how things that many of us are blind to. How is my behavior affecting others, and I'm blind to it, which is one of the themes, certainly of Oedipus. Anyway, that was a long prelude to a conversation that has many levels.
It's turning it around, as you say, not looking at the plays and the acting and so on, as if you're looking at it as a critic at the performance and whether it entertains you or how well it's done. But you're pointing towards the question about the purpose of theatre. And Goethe himself, of course, refers to this in very sarcastic ways, was taking the theme of whatever contemporary culture is doing is misunderstanding and poor in relationship to what it was originally in an objective sense. So your first starting comments about the praise for a work in the audience. I can't think of any other way to say a work in the audience. It's or to enable you can't quietly say it, to enable the audience to work on itself. In your examples, it seemed to be like the audience to work on themselves. The particular association I had from what you said, referring to this first part of looking at the audience, was so impressed by a lecture I heard by the master of the Temple in London. The Temple is an area where you have a church which belonged to the Templars and was actually used as a location for the film of Dan Brown's book, The Da Vinci Code. And I heard the master of the Temple talk about this and the Da Vinci Code and so on. But he then got to this point, I won't go into details about talking about the Gospel of St. John. And he said to us, what is this gospel about? And he said, it's you, the reader. And I thought, it's like a jolt, produced a jolt in my mind. It's about the reader. And you can just immediately, just getting that idea, you see how it sort of could twist around in the mind, because it was dealing with things like books and so on. They're all sort of out there, and you're looking at them, whether you like them, prefer them, the quality, what you admire, you don't admire, and so on. But it's still saying, look, the whole point is you. And there's a part of that which was brought out by the Sufi who influenced Bennett to some degree, was Shah, when he wrote all these teaching stories, because you go through them and he portrayed it beautifully, and sometimes with the commentaries. It's about saying, well, look, in an olden sense, you see, what's the moral of the story? You know, like an old fable. So the one he said, no. He said, it's to discover through the reactions you have to the story something about the way you are thinking. And I thought, went, wow, I never heard this presented before. You know, you have that in front of you, is to arouse something in you, to bring it out and expose it. And then you can look at it, my God, you see, but this is all my assumptions, my ways of interpreting things and denying their possible, their underlying meaning, and there is this different way. So those
wow. You use the word arousing, the arousing of thought, the request of the author of Beelzebub to read aloud as if to someone else. What does that provide you? It provides you the opportunity to observe your own responses to the material.
So you don't want the piece of work itself to be like, how to say, a continuum of what's going on in your head anyway, or which is around you in the newspapers. You want something which is coming from left field. You're going to go and you're going to go in front of it. What? You know, like I still get irritated by Gurdjieff. You know, oh, just a patriarchal, conditioned, old-fashioned git. You know,
just what part of that am I still?
Oh, that's right. Am I still?
There you go. That's Oedipus. Suspects everybody else of conspiracy, of blaming him. It could not possibly be him at all.
That's right. That's right.
How can you imagine that I would that you would get away with making me turning it into a conspiracy against me?
That leads him to, you know, with Tiresias to commit the Philistine of cursing at him. You're just blind, Tiresias.
And he says, blind in your eyes, blind in your mind, blind in your body, blind. You know nothing.
So it turns upon him. So so this is quite a powerful point. So we started off with stumbled into. You brought up, of course, you're full about the theater of war, but this working in the audience. So we should, I think, find a way ourselves to do this. But what is going on in this audience now? And I'm thinking of this when I say this audience, in particular, various people around who might be interested in spiritual ideas, Gurdjieff ideas, Steiner ideas, or something like this, because it has a certain character, which I'm more and more convinced has become, how to say, so it's lost its point, so to speak. It's an old thing. It's no longer proper to the times. And there may be enough people around who are feeling a different kind of being lost. And I don't know if we had this conversation. I think we might have had it. I don't know who I had it with, about fourth way refugees.
Yes.
Did I? Yes, we did with you, you know, this kind of thing. And I think people, a lot of actually, they're putting on a brave face, but a lot of them are kind of lost souls, you see. With all this stuff about, you know, generating an inner body, whatever it was, and hidden directorates, higher intelligences in the Himalayas, whatever form it actually takes. And they say it's all come to nothing. There's no evidence for it at all. And so where does that leave us? Were we just idiots going along with this? And is it just a veil we put in front of our faces, or in front of the world rather, you know, to hide what our deepest doubt, and now we're facing with kinds of doubt and fear which we didn't know before, or whatever it is. I'm trying, in some of the little things I try with people, to get into conversations saying, you know, what's going on with you? What's real for you? And this kind of thing. But it seems like having the theater is a special way of doing this. Maybe it's not the only way. There, I could imagine a kind of something equivalent to a cognitive therapy. Now I'm just waffling in words, just could have like one-to-one conversations, but it couldn't really happen in practice. Imagine yourself being the person I just drawn in and say, okay, let's look into the way you actually think about the world and yourself. But as an investigation, you would bridle, you would sort of be all tensed up, or you start putting on airs. And that reminds me of another association of mine, and I'll stop and give you a chance to come back in. I found the film, he's an American avant-garde filmmaker, 100 years ago, quite some time ago, used to make these short films. I still remember to this day, and I wish I could find it online on who he was. But all he did, he took a starlet, a very beautiful young starlet, naked in front of the camera, and that's all he just did that. Now, and she stood there, and of course she's used to presenting herself, so she started in a way posing. Then you could see she ran out of those moves, her repertoire, and then there was this almost terrifying moment. You could see in her eyes where she had nothing. It was like nothing in front of the camera. It was just really heartbreaking in many respects, and just saw that sense of loss. And I thought that was a remarkable piece of filming, even though it's in a way it's unethical or cruel, because that's what it was. Like the edit line, I don't know how it goes in, still looking at people in the tube and seeing the people suddenly becoming aware of themselves and then becoming aware of their emptiness, and then sort of distracted by distraction from distraction, and just like a piece of paper blown in the wind. Anyway, but all of that, but I'm just emphasizing because I don't know, because we're getting to area I really don't know. The audience, what's happening? Make it dramatic, but could there be a side of this which is for the actor? Because my absurd wish, I said to you, which is still absurd, I want to be able to deal with the work ideas of Gurdjieff and so on by stand-up comedians or something, but get it, it's just turn it into a kind of performance, which would, jokes and so on, is like Gurdjieff really knew is a powerful way of doing it. Mm-hmm. Hence, that's what in stories.
Get people to laugh at their circumstances.
Yeah, and then maybe laugh at themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Back in the Greek tragedies, because I'm taken with not analyzing it, but questioning the way in which they are most useful. So Brian said they spend the majority of their focus and energy on audience development, audience cultivation, audience reaching out to the right people and creating the setting where this dialogue.
So people kind of selecting the audience.
Well, after they've done over 1,000 performances now, so groups approach them now. But they originally would say, well, this particular play speaks to the racial violence in Ferguson where a Black man was shot. They go to Ferguson. They get the choir of the police and a Black church together. They go to homeless shelters in the Bronx. They go in there. They go to hospices where nurses are caring for people dying and engage them in the conversation that's provoked through the chosen scenes of different plays and use them as medicine. And part of the medicine is that people share in this experience communally and speak their stories, maybe for the first time that they ever shared them, and are heard. And they have never thought of themselves as having a story worth hearing, or that anybody wants to hear it. So the mythological stories are triggers to get people to open up and be given permission to speak their story and to have it be acknowledged. And that's where the play itself is not the healing.
It's not the
well, use the word healing loosely,
okay.
but it is not the it's what happens afterwards. It's the conversation where people who never felt they had a voice have one. And
you know, sorry to interrupt you. I just because it's full of this, even though it's a kind of almost an abstract thing, but it came from looking at things to do with psychoanalysis. And I think the as a generalization, say people connected with spiritualities and so on often sort of sneer at psychoanalysis, but it had really profound insights into it. And I was particularly interested in the phenomenology of what's called association, free association. Now, and Owen's contrary to the called Gurdjieffian canon, so this free association was taken to be in psychoanalysis the core vein of creativity. Is it just this free association where there's not the words are very tantalizing in a way. It means free. It's not tied to a certainly tied to conditioned response or to a free-formed response to a previous stimulus, whatever it was. That something comes in, which is a response, but it's not apparently predetermined by that stimulus. So it's not acting like a machine. So, but it's very so. Because what you find in the actual practice of this, you must come across it in your work with actors on or people on improvisation, that there's a lot of inhibition which is blocking this all the time. You know, somebody says something, and you say, well, just what comes into your mind, and you can see them going through about 1,000 alternatives before they blurt something out, and there's a precious amount of material in there. To speaking for myself, in that. Which I metaphorically said, you know, going through 1,000 alternatives before the so because I'm quite convinced I can oversee it in my own experience just at the moment of asking somebody says something and there's the gap and it comes in. Immediately there's something quite vivid there. Immediately, within the microsecond, then within half a second it's already getting coated. Within a second it's turned into a banality. And it's covered over and covered over, like choo choo choo, covering over until it's something which then becomes what you always say. It's come from your repertoire, your recordings, but they say the opportunity in the free association doesn't do that. And I've been involved with people who try to use some psychological methods, like Gordon Lawrence, who has this dream matrix, social dreaming matrix. You know, people come with their dreams, and they would say the people there come with their own dreams as well, and they change dreams. But something if you come to a free association from the dream in that moment, but it's in that moment, you see, and it's very difficult. Now, there's all of that, which is in itself is really, really profound to us. But then there's the other side to it, the other component, the other half, which comes back to your Oedipus. And that was called amplification. Now, when you spoke about the people responding to the myths, you see, this was it. It's like the Oedipus myths and so on, gives you something which, so to speak, takes the perhaps, I call it shredded or fragmented bits and pieces you can associate with, and gives them a form, and suddenly so the pieces begin to produce a chemistry, an action from them. It becomes strengthened because you're reflecting it into the, you know, and there was a passage in Mircea Eliade's, the anthropologist, on the myth of eternal return. He talks about the hero's journey and so on. And this, the time, the mythical time, which the myth deals with, so that it's like before you've entered into an action or an adventure, there's already the god has gone through it or has demonstrated this, and you enter into it. It's like there's been this time when this has already been done, and you're resonating with that archetype. You see, and this produces a power which you couldn't have just from your own energy. So I'm sorry to take the time on this, but I've been so concerned over the years to find ways of expressing this. So I think it's one of the greatest insights in psychoanalysis. And it shows why people should be, talking about movies and poems and whatever it is, because this is how you get these reflectors. We're not just throwing back at them, they're fragments, but they have these ways of putting fragments together into this passion, this meaning.
Making meaning.
Okay.
I've heard that expression before as what is storytelling? It's a meaning maker.
That's right. You get to Viktor Frankl, logotherapy, the therapy of making meaning. And my mentor, Patrick Mara, used to say the greatest healing is in meaning. Meaning heals. He made that very foundational. But so that we need this is why having the play part of your story about the theater of war, having it there is this amplification, but it's like, well, perhaps too primitive form of language, they're providing a form which can really contain in a very actual sense the content, but the content is in the audience. It gives a vessel, a containment for that, which is the way you started describing it. Seems to be very like that, but you need the container. The stage itself is a container.
Yes, and the event happens in a group, in a community. I think that.
Yeah, I got to stop there again and say, like, it's horrible word group, but I just pause and say, yeah. Watch this group. It's community. You see, there's a certain something about people.
Well, there's a natural division and mistrust of other people, and a tendency to think that we're the only ones who feel a certain way, or who have had something particular happen to us. And maybe that's more of a modern Western thing, because there's so much division between our society. And my neurosis is my neurosis, and my my problem is unique to me.
You leave my neurosis alone.
But then in community sharings, one of the first steps of healing, or of letting go of it, letting go of the story, is to say, oh my God, I'm not the only one. And in fact, that person's story is way worse than mine. And I can actually have empathy for this poor person, because I connect with that particular quality of pain. And someone else's story will remind me of details of my story, which the details are different, but the quality of pain, or the quality of suffering, or the quality of emotion is similar. I can resonate with it and feel a connection with them. I think that's one of the things that theater is uniquely able to do when it's used in this way.
This is so incredible. It's such a sensitive and point, Jesai, about you use the phrase like sharing experiences. That gets it wrong, because it's like seeing the same experience. It's the same. It's not, I got my experience, you got your experience, we exchange them, and this kind of thing. No, it's, you actually see, my God, it is the same. And now, this is what the theory might give us. I'm lost for words, and the theater is based on words. It can give an experience which gets beyond the words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even though often theater uses a lot of words. Yes. The ancient Greeks, that's what there was, and great long passages to express the challenges of existence, and the qualities of suffering that I'm going through right now, and with enormous conscious detail of what's happening to me in ways that most people don't have the vocabulary or the time to express all those layers of being.
That's why that's what really brought home to me, Jesai, this sense of pondering about these various people in different circumstances, little fragments about in this round, this theme of speaking the truth about one situation. You know, I've talked to you in some people's conversation. I was just impressed at scholars finding out the possible influence of Gurdjieff in, quite some time ago now on various artistic communities, because he introduced a very strong challenge about speaking the truth of oneself, about the truth of autobiography and so on. And when you spoke about the Greeks, I remember being self-conscious of somebody doing Medea, I think it was, and standing on the stage and articulating this inner rage and conflict and murderous intent and so on. And you just said, this is pure naked consciousness, just there. Bringing this into articulation. And I was talking to a small group of people, or with them, not to them, but with them, at the time about this, and somebody saying, getting people, can we get people to speak about what's with them in the moment, because this is the important, it's got to be not as a reflection on the past and not as a sort of an imagination about the future, but what's going in you now, coming on in me now, and say, there's something about now which makes the theater so strong, because it's just what's happening is happening in that moment, in that very moment. It's not it's very different from a book. You can look at previous pages or something. You can't look in previous pages. But now I'm going away from the topic. There's this sense of it's these visceral words, simple words like touch, which is maybe a better thing than feeling, but just it touches you, or you are touched. And what is it you're touched? It's a thing to do with being, with what really is. Something. I'm glad I'm feeling myself now getting, my words are vague and all this, and I'm very glad about this, because I had a very dear friend, American, he was a consultant. He died very young, unfortunately, but he used to say, well, he does training with, as you might do training with people and consulting and coaching and so on, but and he said you're getting them to the people talking about their experience. He said, I don't get much from the people who are beautifully articulate. They talk about the experience, they tell their stories with great eloquence. He said, but somebody who stutters and falls silent, they convey something which the others don't, and it's this faltering speech, which is when you say, when I hear that faltering speech, then I'm interested. It reminds me so much about amplification. You go to meetings of remarkable men, the Gurdjieff story about I think it's Father Giovanni, and talks about the two brothers in the monastery, and brother Says and Ahes, and they hundreds of years old, but one gives a talk and he's like the voice of paradise. Everybody loves him. They feel enraptured. The other is a shuffling old man. You can hardly hear what he's talking about. And he's mumbled and bumbling. But after he's finished, they just feel full of something. As a prefer. The other one, Aziz, they had this wonderful experience while listening to him, but afterwards, like there was nothing had happened to them. And Ted Hughes found the thing when he was doing research into, I don't know what came of it. I'm still trying to track down this information. People at the First World War, that whole change which happened, well, it's still happening, because at that time, people didn't talk about their experiences at all. Had these people going through those horrific things, but if they go to their grave, they would never have told their children what it was like or anything like that. When it began to change, they said, talking to these people, he found the very same thing. It's the people for whom their words failed that communicated a lot. So I was addressed myself. Sometimes I feel myself doing talking, and it's like it's so easy. What's the point? But when I don't know what I'm, it sounds a weird both. So I don't know what I'm talking about, and I don't know what's happening, and that there is value.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a pause, a lull. I want to think about turning it back to any kind of idea that in our background of conversation, just think about the Gurdjieff work or Fourth Way or something like that, and its variants and its methods. And there's something about to do with theater. I really want to dig into you, metaphorically, of course, yeah, about your experiences about this. To do with, you see, there's a lot of the stuff in the Fourth Way and similar things, spiritual things. It's rather right on the side of meditation and inner exercises, consciousness and awareness and all that kind of thing. You see, but it's not. There's very little in it to do with what Bennett was, for example. He said he was very keen on, which is manifestation. What comes through in manifestation, you manifest yourself when you actually got to say something, at least something, act. And he had this theme, slogan, you see, this central work was the perfection of doing. And as I believe, you had to be doing something. So this side, which most people are interested in, they take spiritual, I mean, sitting cross-legged with incense and meditating. That's what they think is spiritual. And, but Gurdjieff had this tough edge to him and say, no, it's like you in the middle of losing your temper with your wife. What do you do then? And something, what can come in then? That's the real work. You're in the midst of life. And you have to put out, do something, say something, act, That's when it shows up. And I think Goethe had a sense of this. So I can't find, because I don't read German, the original text for it. But he always emphasized action as being far more to the point than any kind of conception or meditation or awareness or consciousness. It's the act. Actually, you've got to fucking stand out there and do something. So that's the sense I want to get. So that's through that there might be, you don't. You see, I'm very glad I'm stuttering here, so to speak, metaphorically. You don't report on the experience you had yesterday when you saw God or something. And who cares? But it's and you're able to do something, but it's even doing can be saying, but it's not saying which is like retrospective. This happened to me yesterday. It's not the kind of slogan either. It's just a saying which has got so intimate, like it breaks out of your heart. It goes, yeah, there it is. By saying you give yourself. Exactly that sort of thing. And for me, that's what's central to what I call real kind of inner, real work for reality.
So by saying, one brings something into being.
Yes.
So like Jean-Luc Picard says, make it so.
Amen.
And I'm aware of that in my own project. If I make a statement, which is, and I have to be very sure I'm willing to follow through with it, which is, I am committing to staging Oedipus on this date, for instance. When I'm ready to make that statement, it causes a whole lot of things to come into motion. It actually attracts people that will help do that, and identifies people who don't want to do that. And a schedule appears, and support appears, and a script appears, and money appears. Sometimes. Well, enough support to fit the size of the directive. Happens. I remember a story about some guru in India whose name I don't remember, but he said to all his followers, he said, "We are going to build a very big temple right here." And it was in the middle of nowhere. But master, where's the money coming from? Wherever the money is at the moment.
That's pretty good.
It comes with the knowledge and awareness that this thing is the thing that has to be done next. Or that's my limited experience in my theater world. When I've taken on projects and made that statement, I will, of course, have all my waking hours alert to the wherewithal to cause it to happen. So I'll notice things differently because I made that statement and that commitment to myself. I'll notice opportunities. I'll notice people that resonate with it. It will cause me to have conversations that enroll people in it for their benefit. That's a kind of magical thing to me. It's like,
it is. What conjures up in me, and the reference for me would be, I don't know if you've ever done it, a decision exercise of Bennett. He was very interested in the phenomenology of all of this. You see, it's, I was going to first of all to ask you, when you say something, we are going to do Oedipus here, or something like that. And when you said, actually, it is so. There's no it is so. It's not the bravado. We are going to build like a Trump or some idiot like that. It is because you recognize, and there is a few people pointing this out. One was actually Jacob Needleman, and it was the other people whose names I can't remember now, because it's in that elusive field. It's like you get into and we actually you do something now which is contained in it the fact that something will definitely happen, but it's as if that thing in the future is happened now. It's already happened. It's in the future, but it has already happened, and that kind of feeling.
I have certainly had that experience when I'm able to have a full all-centered yes to something.
Right.
I have seen that it's already done, and I'm just fulfilling the steps of bringing it into reality. That
it's curious, isn't it? Because it's
certainly so.
Already done, but you still got to fill in the steps.
Yeah. You still have to wake up and do the next thing, and say, "Oh, I need to call this person. Call that person. Now I know why I called you." The discovery of
that's it. You know, in a sense that these two worlds. There's one world who is already done. There's another world in which you've got to make it happen.
Exactly. And
something like that.
Funny story about two different ways of operating. My wife is a doer, and she's a checklist doer. She says, "Okay, this is where we're going. These are the steps to get there. We have to do this today and this tomorrow." And it was around creating this performing arts center where I am right now. We got the place. 2 weeks later, COVID hit and the whole world was closed. And we had workers fixing it up. And she said, "Yeah, but you have your performing arts center. Where are the actors coming from?" And I didn't say wherever they are at the moment, but I said, they're coming. They're coming. And well, it took 7 months of the world being shut down, but they came by seemingly coincidence, meeting the top actress in the country who had no work and showed up to my workshop. She had 5 friends who were the top actors in the country who had no work and came and lived here. We created an amazing King Lear because everybody had no work and they wanted to live here and they got food. Like it just the where it comes from is unknown. But when you were talking earlier, I was thinking of about the statement of action, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Thy will, if you will it, it will be done. And I had a little revelation like a few minutes ago from that of, oh, is that what that means? And I always appreciate the language of we are created in the image and likeness of the creator. And if it's the creator, then we are mini creators. We are creators in our own atmosphere, our own world.
No doubt at all about it.
And then that language, thy will be done, just took on a new meaning for me, which I hadn't appreciated for myself in my own experience before. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
It's already done in heaven. We just got to carry it out here on earth. That sort of attitude.
And it's will, the important thing.
Yes.
Willing it and being willing to do it.
The funny thing about will, it's puzzled with it. I keep on puzzling about it. It is, I'm very much in favor of it because the influence on me of Bennett, of course, and it was my kind of reserve. And I hear people everywhere talking all the time about consciousness and getting more consciousness and what makes us human is consciousness. And I think, oh, that's kid stuff. The consciousness is no triviality. But because will can, and it's very strange, will can operate when you're dead asleep in bed. When you're unconscious, will can still operate. You see, it's not dependent on being conscious at all. Because when that's where it's decided, then it means you can, it's a decision that's entered into you. And it's in all the states you can get into, whether you're just dispersed, muddle-headed, ecstatic, together, and not together, in turbulence, whatever it is, in an enlightened state, in a depressed state. If there's a will element, then the will is sustained throughout it all. This is, for me, and I even say to myself, this may be just bullshit I'm inventing in my own mind, but really good bullshit. And I'd like it to be true. And I'm actually deciding if it to be true. So I don't have to be, this is what people sort of subconsciously accept when they do about, take their dreams seriously as part of themselves. So still their will entering into the dream world. You see, it doesn't have to be in their waking state. If you identify the will with what happens in your waking state, you miss a load of stuff because it's all, working things out before having a plan, they're encompassing and all of this, but there's something very different in will. And you just, again, we touch upon it in this conversation, we touch upon these things, and I don't have to rush it to myself and say, I got it now, but I don't have it, but it's just so true. And
the other line that you mentioned earlier, and the word became flesh.
Did I say that?
Yeah, I think you did, or maybe it was
I did. But anyway, it's good anyway.
Somebody yesterday said that.
Yeah.
And the word became flesh. That every manifestation, we were speaking about manifestation, might begin with the statement out loud that's received by other people.
Right
and
on.
It puts a series of actions into motion to realize something. And the other part connected with that is giving one's word in connection with willing something to happen.
It is a lovely phrase, that giving my word. It's just lovely. I just thought it's incredible gesture. I give you my word.
If I give my word that I will show up tomorrow at 2:00 to meet with you, if I don't do it, if I change my mind, or if I forget, I have no existence at that moment. I does not exist. So
Yes.
my word and my I grows by being more conscious of the effectiveness of my words and the following through with what I said. I will.
Being true to your word. You see, that's a lovely phrase, isn't it, too? Are you true to your word?
Mm-hmm.
Ordinary phrases, there's so much intelligence in them.
It creates my being. I have no being if my word has no value to me or to other people around me. Like, oh yeah, he always says that, but he never shows up, or he always promises this, but he's not there. Like a complete unconsciousness of the words that are coming out and the impact on others and on oneself for just saying shit that is inconsequential or is unconscious. I think there's something in that around manifestation, around action, around not consciousness, but being, like to grow. That's how I understand it anyway. If I grow my being, then I am responsible for my words and the following through of what I said.
Go listen to your own words for a start, you know, and say, do I really mean this? You know, and say, well, start meaning what you say.
Well, that's interesting in relation to Oedipus.
Yes.
Because he has to eat all of his words, everything. He has denied categorically that he could have anything to do with any of this. In front of the whole community, he's denied it. He even refused an opportunity to speak privately. Like Creon says, well, I'll tell you what the oracle says, but maybe we should go inside and I'll share it with you privately. And he says, no, share it with everybody. It's more important to me than anything in the world. He even curses himself publicly if he had anything to do with hiding the murderer. And yeah. Oops.
You know, I tell you, my associations have taken me into monologue. And it's connected with Oedipus, but it's also with that great episode in Tarkovsky's film, Stalker. By the way, I came across a nice article about him. I didn't know he was very fond of Rudolf Steiner, Tarkovsky. It's a very interesting. But anyway, it's a scene where the stalker's wife, it just faces the camera. She got a speech about 10 minutes talking about her life. It's just so extraordinary. And I started the association when I was, you know, going back to people, we call it in the work. We're forgiven for using that phrase. And it's something to do with declare in front of your fellow men, so to speak, or fellow people, humans, you know, declare yourself. And this sort of, I don't know, there's ambiguity when Gertie talks about you need to be true towards your group leader or something like this, which sits uncomfortably with me. But I just, it was forming in me this image of, you know, can anybody really stand up and say, here I am? And it's maybe the longing to, all allowed to do that. It's connected with the old mythology about, you know, the day of judgment and you know, being called to account, which all traditions have in their different ways, but they're in front of God and he says, what have you been up to? And you have it, but there's something so amazing for me about even the thought of it. And so it's, you know, then you see one of the consequences of the reflection, because this is not right, hardly ever happens, and nothing hardly ever happens. So maybe what we're doing instead of our talking world is mostly concerned with covering up who I am, pretending, putting on a mask. So the actor in the old days, putting on a mask, which was literal, and like those wonderful masks they still use in the Greek theater and so on. They're just like, I still got a picture on my wall somewhere about the Orestes or something, one of those plays in BBC production with their masks. And so it's just to me stunning. I just look at it, I'm like, wow, this is reality. This is how it really is. But the persona, the masks are not there. And in all these groups they meet together and they find ways and they talk. So it's around little shunting railways, they just it goes round and round and all these prescribed areas and nothing to say. Nobody stands up. Because what would say? I always think they could stand up and say, "Here I am," and the world would go up in flames or something. It would just be so extraordinary because everything seems to be based on a pretense. So it's like there is live in a world of bad acting and bad scripts. Don't you feel it? I mean, when suddenly you must feel it. It's like, and even that simple associate, just what I was saying, then you get in, sort of looking at things like musicals. I see musical films and enjoying it and so on. So, yeah, you just get the sun. If people in real life with Sunny get together and start singing a song together, this would be a wonderful reality. So.
It would. Always look on the bright side of life. Yeah, I do love that the article you wrote about the actor some years ago. I think it was 2013.
Thank you so much.
And you mentioned, and I told you I read it a number of years ago before we reconnected. So that's one of the reasons I was so delighted to meet you again at A&E. Say, Anthony Blake is here. Oh my God. How incredible. But what I liked particularly was the comment around, and I'm paraphrasing, that drama exists because of unconscious people. There was something like that. Can you help me with that?
No, I can't help you. I vaguely remember it, but I can't help you at the time. This time.
If we were conscious and awake, there would be no drama.
Yeah.
It was something like that. So like, I read it as all characters are damaged people. Like we're trying to get what we want from other people. And that's actually how plays are constructed. Yes. We're getting our needs met through somebody else rather than doing our own personal inner work. There's no awareness of that.
Yeah. So you can't, you don't get ever, in fact, people like Raj trying to think about doing this, and you don't get any kind of plays which show people working on themselves ever.
No. You might get self-reflective monologues, and yes. in Shakespeare, many of them happen. The moment of revelation comes right before their death, and they have a beautiful monologue. I think once I shared with you Richard II's monologue about his realization of his place in the world and human beings in it, and then moments later, an assassin comes and kills him.
Listening to you like this, Jesai, and I think I just really need a whiskey or something.
Whiskey.
I know it's just this effect on me. You just want to kind of like, yes, amen. You're going to show me a glass of whiskey or something and torment me, are you?
No, I don't have one. But right at this moment, for the comedy of my life, is my two dogs just came in and one of them put his feet right up on me. And that means you've been talking enough. Take us for a walk.
Okay. We might end at that moment then, because I don't like to come to any sense of conclusion, because there is no conclusion to this.
No conclusion, to be continued.
God bless you, sir. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you.
It's a pleasure and a privilege, as always, sir.